Hi. Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name's Amy Leach. I'm one of the coaches with the Heartland Foundation, and I have laryngitis. So I'm going to do my best to get us through tonight. And we'll get started here. If you have questions, put them in the chat line. Hopefully, Coach William is going to man the chat line. And then I'll stop and ask questions after each section in the chat line. So, welcome to the Heartland Institute's Financial Aid Program. My name is Amy Leach. I am one of the experts here at I'm one of the coaches here at the Heartland Foundation, and I used to work in financial aid, so I often do this financial aid seminar. The good news is, last year to this year, there's been very little change in the FAFSA. So the first question everybody asks is, why should I fill out the FAFSA? And even families who don't have low income should fill out the FAFSA because it's the first step towards any award. Colleges often award merit scholarships based on having a FAFSA on file. So every student should fill out a FAFSA. The groups that are eligible for FAFSA are U.S. citizen, eligible non-citizens, resident aliens, green card holders. Students on F1 visas, H4 and H5 visas can also fill out the FAFSA. If you are a student on a visa, when it asks for your social security number, you're going to put in zeros in there. And you aren't eligible for federal aid, but often colleges will award aid based on that. So before you start the FAFSA document, I really encourage you to spend a little bit of time and get your documents together. I have a senior this year, so I actually did this too. But having everything together and everything ready before you start really saves you time when you're in the document trying to get everything filled out. So the first thing you want to get is a FAFSA ID. You need one for the student. Every student should have their own FAFSA ID. And then one for a parent. Whichever parent's tax information is going in the FAFSA, that's the parent who needs to get a FAFSA ID. So if you are a family of divorce, whichever parent you live with 51% of the time is the parent you're going to file the FAFSA with. I encourage that parent to be the parent who makes the lower income. There's no sound, huh? Let's see what I can do.
We can hear you.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can hear you.
Okay, good. I just saw in the chat there was no sound. I'm like, what? Oh no. Okay. So if you are a child of divorce, the parent who makes the least money is who you want to file the FAFSA with this year. That's going to change next year, but for this year, if you can get that parent to file the FAFSA for you, it could make a difference. It may not, but it could. The FAFSA account that you use and set up is the account you're going to use your entire college career. So put it somewhere safe, make sure you save it, make sure you know what it is. That's the website for the FAFSA ID. At the very end of the presentation, I'm going to have a slide up with all the websites on it. So now that you've got yourself together, you've got your FAFSA ID, you've got your documents, you need bank statements, driver's license, social security number, tax return, but we're going to auto-load the tax return, and I'm going to talk about that this year. I'm going to show you how to do that. So that's basically the documents you need. 529 plans. And we'll go over those assets that you have to report. Then you can go to the FAFSA website. So to get, you can either just search online for FAFSA form and it'll take you to the FAFSA website, or you can download the student app to do a FAFSA. So what you need, your parent or legal guardian and the student FAFSA ID, tax returns, and other income documents, Social Security card, alien resident card, driver's license, your most recent tax return and W-2s. And most parents and students are going to transfer their documents. Additional information you may need. If you receive child support or education benefits, untaxed income, and then current balance of your checking, savings, stocks, bonds, and other investments. So now we've got all our paperwork together. Yay, hooray. So we're all excited to start our FAFSA. No, not really. I would tell you to plan on about an hour to an hour and a half to fill out the document. Just so you plan your time accordingly. You can sometimes get it done faster, but even for me, who's done this 100 times, it took me about 40 minutes to do my son's FAFSA. Just making sure I got everything in right, taking my time with it, making sure I answered all the questions. So this is the page you go to. And if you have never filled out a FAFSA before, you are going to start a new FAFSA, start here. If you're a returning student and have filled out a FAFSA before, you can go to returning user. If you start the FAFSA and don't finish it, you can save it. And when you come back, you're not going to start a new one. You're going to be a return user and log back into your account. %98 of our students are dependents with parents. All students are considered dependents till the age of 25 for FAFSA rules, unless they meet one of the following criteria. If the child is under 25 and married, has a dependent child, or is active duty military. The other category, if they are declared a ward of the state, they can be independent. But those are the only 4 categories that allow a student not to have to put their parents' tax information on their FAFSA. Okay. I will, there's a question about taxes. I'll get to that and I'll talk about that. People should still be able to join the meeting. That's my other question. I don't know why they wouldn't be. So the first section of the FAFSA, this is the student's information. Sections 1 through 3 are all student information, student demographics. That kind of thing. Section 4 is parent information. The new thing in parent information this year is question 72, which is household size, which allows families, if they have other family members living with them, to add to their household size. In the past, that wasn't allowed, and that can increase their financial need. And then the other thing in the parent information, IRAs are only claimed on FAFSA if you take a withdrawal from them. And I know with COVID, some families have done that. So that's where that is. Hang on one second. Apparently Megan cannot get on. My boss can't get on. Okay. So, and then step 5 is to be completed by a student who's not a dependent. Okay. Section 6, step 6 is the colleges that the student plans to attend. Now, the cool thing about this is you can always add, take schools off, no problem. The other thing is, if you live in states like Connecticut, Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, or Vermont, you need to prioritize your schools, your in-state schools in particular. Your first in-state school that you want to attend needs to be your first school you list in your FAFSA colleges, because it will increase your chance of getting aid at that school. So step 7 is to sign and date your FAFSA. But before you sign and date your FAFSA, please, 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 it says right on the screen, can I view a FAFSA summary? You click yes, view my summary. You save it as a PDF. You send it to your coach. Let the coaches review it. I have yet to have a FAFSA that I haven't had to make a change or a correction to. So here are some items that I want you guys to pay close attention to. Question 11 in the student section asks for your driver's license. If you have a driver's license, put it in there. This really decreases your chance of getting selected for verification. About 60% of students get selected for verification, which means you have to turn in extra documents, your tax documents, other sources of revenue information. But what I've seen is that students who don't put their driver's license number in and have a driver's license get selected for verification, almost guaranteed. Question 22 is for male students only. It is about registering for selective service. Now, it is no longer required to register for selective service to be eligible for FAFSA, but all male students between the ages of 18 and 25 need to register for selective service. So FAFSA is an easy way to get that done. Otherwise, it'll happen at the driver's license office. Questions 24 and 25 ask for parents' highest level of education. If you do not have a degree from the United States, high school diploma is the answer there. Your parents have a high school diploma. If your parents have degrees in the United States, it can be a bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD, put those in there. But a lot of schools give funding to first generation college students. So if your parents did not get a degree in the United States, then put high school diploma because it makes students eligible for more aid. And then question 26 is just worded really funny. And the correct answer is a high school diploma. It asks, what degree will you have at the time of filing this document? And you're gonna have a high school diploma. I know you don't have it yet. I know the students don't have it yet, but that's what we're gonna do. What if the student only has a state ID? Then they don't put it in. It's fine that they only have a state ID, but they don't need to put it in the FAFSA document for driver's license. Here you can see the selective service registration. See all the clicks on the top of the form. So the student demographics is the first one, school selection, dependent status. But male students, and then you can tell them to register you. So if your student isn't 18 yet, they can get registered when they start. So a few more items to pay attention to. Question 29 is your college level. And the college level is never attended college, first time student. If you are a high school student currently, even if you took some college classes in high school, you're not going to put you've completed any college at this point in time. Does not matter. Question 30 is the type of degree or certificate you're earning. Even if you plan to attend community college, this is your first bachelor's degree. And then question 31, invariably students put no or unknown. Put yes here for work study. It doesn't mean you have to take a job on campus, but if you put yes, you can be eligible for work study jobs or research jobs on campus. And I think that's a great opportunity. And then question 6 is the colleges that you plan to apply to. And the easiest way to do this, I'm going to show you what the FAFSA screen looks like. You have to put in the state, the city, the school name. If you mistype it, it doesn't come up. The easiest way to do this is to search on the web first and get the FAFSA ID for all of your schools. Just have a list of, with a piece of paper on the side, says, you know, I'm in Colorado, so I'm going to use Colorado School of Mines and their FAFSA code. So I can just type in their FAFSA code because you can search by FAFSA code, and it's so much faster to put those in than if you're searching by individual student. So then we're on to section 4, which is the parents. See, right in this little top, parent demographics, it's step 4. It's so nice. You can click between them and fill out information too. I love that feature this year. That's my favorite thing. Favorite new thing in this. Make sure your parents' name. And then we're going to talk about if the parents are divorced, right? I talked about this a little bit. If your parents are divorced, you are required to report the parent you live with 51% of the time. Now, there is an advantage this year to living with a parent that makes less money, conceivably. If your parents' income is too high, it won't matter, but it could be an advantage to you. So I always say spend an extra day with a parent that makes less income. Question 82 asks about a Schedule 1. This is new. And if you auto-load your tax return, this is not going to be a big deal. I'll talk specifically about Schedule 1 in a minute. Question 83 asks if you're a dislocated worker. So if a parent has lost their job since January of 2020 or 2021, you can mark yes on this. Now, this question online will not come up if your family income is over $60,000, okay? You can always go back to the school and ask for it. You can go back to the school once you've decided on a school if your parents have lost their job and their income is more than that. So don't freak out if question 83 doesn't come up for you, because if your income is too high, it won't come up. Okay, I'm going to check something on the chat line. If a parent spends the same amount of time with their divorced parents, they need to spend one more day with the parent that makes less money. 1 day in the year. Just add 1 year, 1 day to the year. And then questions 82 through 87 are your tax return information. And I want you to auto transfer this from the IRS. It is so much easier than having to look on the tax form and figure out what line from the tax form and fill it in by hand. If the parent doesn't get a FAFSA ID, you can't auto load your tax forms. So we're going to go to that form. So this is the tax form. Did you complete your taxes? Yes, no, or I've already completed. It's there's also a choice for haven't filed yet. You can mark that choice, and then you have to fill in your tax information by hand. Tax form you filled out, and your status when you're filing it. Married, filing jointly, single parent, head of household, doesn't matter. And then you just click on the IRS Retrieval tool, and it takes you here. So you have to select which parent, and then they have to put in their FAFSA ID and password. Okay. And you don't want to be sitting here going, create my FAFSA ID when you're already working on the FAFSA. That's why I really encourage you to do it ahead of time. So that is how you upload your taxes. So I'm going to take a second and answer a couple of questions off the chat line. If a student lives with a parent that makes more income, that's the parent whose income they have to report on the FAFSA. That's the rule. Um, I'm going to say this, next year it isn't going to matter because they're going to have to report both parents' income. So that's kind of the rule. If you have a parent with a disability, to get them to sign the form, you can, if you are their signatory, you can set that up to do that. That's not a problem. If your parents are married, it doesn't matter which parent you use for your FAFSA ID on the tax return. If they file a married filing jointly tax return, it does not matter. If parents are divorced, then it needs to be the parent that we're going to use to file the FAFSA. I'll get to prepaid tuition assets in a minute. It does not matter which parent creates the FAFSA ID if they're filing jointly. Again, if the parents are married, it does not matter. If one parent lost income, when we get to the bottom of this, I will talk about how to report loss of income or unemployment. Every child, every student needs a FAFSA ID. One for the parent can use it for multiple students, but every student needs their own FAFSA ID. Okay, I think that's all on the chat line for now. I'm going to talk about, in a second, question 89 is parents' assets, and this one is always a little bit tricky. But parents' assets are the net value of the asset minus what you owe on it. So if money paid to you from a parent's 529, grandparents 529, you have to claim that on the FAFSA. Rental properties. I know this is a big one. Rental properties are considered an asset, and it has to be how much is the property worth, how much do you minus how much you owe on it, and that is the value of the asset. Talk to your coach if you have this situation. We have some extra information on how to report rental property that we can send out to your family that can hopefully help you. And then the next screen, this is where you report the assets. So it's going to ask you for the current balance of cash, savings, and checking accounts. Okay, that is supposed to be, like if I was filling out my FAFSA today, that should be the amount in my account today. Now, I get paid at the beginning of the month, and I have my house payment comes out later, my car payment comes out later, my insurance payment comes out later. So when I look at my bank account right now, it's much bigger than it's going to be by the end of the month. I take out all those standard payments first. Those come out. And that's how much is in my bank account. And then it says the net worth of your parents' investments, including real estate. And that the thing I want to point out here is not your parents' house. The home you live in does not count as an asset. The cars you drive do not count as assets. On the next screen, I'm going to show you what are assets and what are not have to be included as assets. And we'll go through that line by line. And then it asks the value of your parents' business. If your parents' business doesn't employ 100 people, you do not have to include the value of that business. And it's 100 full-time employees. So here's the next screen. Here's what you have to include in reporting assets and not reporting assets. And yes, as of this year, cryptocurrency has to be recorded as an asset. There's actually a specific line asking about it. So it won't be in your asset group. There's actually a line on the FAFSA that asks about cryptocurrency. So cash, even if it's stuffed in a mattress, bank accounts, checking accounts, savings accounts, CDs, brokerage accounts, money market accounts, investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, stock options, restricted stock options, which I think is terrible because if you leave the company, that money goes away. Exchange trade funds, hedge funds, commodities, precious metals. College savings plans, including the 529. Now, a 529, it will have a student's name on it, and that's fine. It's still counted as a parent asset, not a student asset. If you put this 529 in the student's asset, it will be counted at 80% towards their expected family contribution. If it lives in the parent asset category, it's only counted at 2%. So 529s, even in the student's name, are still under the parent's assets. Businesses, farms, real estate, trust funds, emergency funds. Things you don't have to report. Your primary resident, I already talked about that. A family farm, a small business that with less than 100 full-time employees. Any qualified retirement plans, 401ks, 403bs, 457s, IRAs, Roth IRAs, Kellogg's, any of that. Life insurance policies that have cash values don't have to be included. Personal possessions, jewelries, computers, cars, TVs, artwork, not included. Okay, I know this one gets a lot of questions, so I'm gonna see what we've got up here. Landfalls are property, so they will count as an asset. It would count much like a rental property. If you own a business and it has more than 100 full-time employees, you do have to include the balance in your business's bank account. And if you have a partner or two partners, you can adjust that. So you can split it if it's 50-50, but you have to have 100 full-time employees. And if you have 100 full-time employees, reach out to your coach because they can talk to you about what specifically you have to report. This question is, if a parent didn't graduate from college in the US and you state that their highest degree is a high school diploma, should you also indicate that on the common application? Yes, because the reason for that is that the US does not acknowledge lots of degrees from other countries. I have a friend from South Korea who has a PhD in physics, and he had to literally start over and redo his entire degree. So yes, you can report it that way. Precious metals as a reportable category. If you own stock in precious metals, not if you have a gold wedding ring, no. If you have a gold bar, yes, you have to report that as an asset. But mostly it's if you have stock in precious metals, you would be reporting that. Assets in a living trust, yeah, you have to report those, except the home. If you're living in the home, you don't have to report that. Yes, you have to report real estate owned by the trust, except the home you live in. 529 plans are reported under the parent's assets. Will the reported assets be audited? They can be. 60% of students get selected for verification, and that means you have to turn in your documents, and that includes bank statements and stock statements and W-2s and restricted stock assets from a business. Give me a second. Let me hopefully get my voice back here. Okay, that's up. Schedule 1, tax reporting. You can answer no on question 82. You didn't file a Schedule 1. If you filed a Schedule 1 for unemployment, Alaska resident, education expenses, IRA deductions, student loan deductions, and virtual currency. Okay, so now you've filled all this out. You've got the student demographics, you've got the student schools, you've got the parents' dependency status, you've got the parents' information, the parents' financial information, and then the last section is the student financial information. Students' financial information is very similar to the parents. Most students don't have assets. Most students don't have income. The student's bank account balance needs to be less than $5,000. So student bank account, student bank account balance needs to be less than $5,000. This is really important because if it's more than that, I've seen the student get hit at that higher expected family contribution rate. I had twins. One twin had $4,000 in her account. The other twin had $8,000. The difference in their EFC, because everything else was the same, was that $4,000 difference in their bank accounts. So really, less money in the student assets is a good thing. Wow. Okay. So you finished filling all this out. You're getting to the signature page. See where it says FAFSA summary? Click this button. Click it, click it, click it. Save it as a PDF. Send it to your coach. It will make your coach very happy and will make sure your FAFSA is correct. This is what it looks like. This is a made-up student, but we can look at every single line and make sure it's correct. I had a student 1 year put their parents' income under their income instead of in the other category. So it's really important that you send this to your coach. Okay. Here's the other thing I want to talk about, and then I'll go back to the chat line. Once you've submitted your FAFSA in about 2 weeks, you can get your student aid report. This, when you log into FAFSA, student aid report comes right up. Send that to your coach, and I'll show you that in just a second. My voice is really getting bad, I'm sorry. But you can also edit your FAFSA. So if you want to add colleges or change colleges, this is how you do that. Super easy. Click right there, change your schools. If you need to change some information, you can change it. There is a handful of information that can't be changed. If it doesn't let you change it, you can't change it, and you'll have to change it with the school. This is a student aid report, and the number that you care about is right here. Expected family contribution. This one is 0. That means that you're going to qualify for need-based financial aid. It does not mean that you're going to pay $0 to go to college. I think that's a common mistake that people make and understand. So know that when you get a 0 here, you're going to get full financial aid, but it doesn't mean you're not going to still have to pay some for college. Okay, I'm going to go to the chat line and see what I've got over there. So I've got a bunch of new ones and see what I can do with those. If a parent has an advanced degree in another country, they should not report it. No. If the degree was credentialed in the US, yes, report it. If both parents have different bank accounts, they both need to be reported if the parents are married and filing jointly. Can you reallocate a parent loan back to the student when the student's done with school? Yes. The parent loan, the parent is just the co-signer on the loan. The student is actually responsible for that loan. And I'll talk about student loans here in just a second. If you don't have a Heartland coach, reach out to whoever invited you. They can get you in contact with one of us to help you look over a FAFSA. Yes. So in the student's checking account, checking and savings account combined, that is only in the student name. So both my kids have checking accounts, but they're under my bank account, so I can transfer money to them. So those accounts won't matter. I'll report that money as my checking account balance. But if the student has their own checking account in their own name that's not under their parent, which students often do to raise their credit score, that kind of thing, you want that balance to be under $5,000. Parent accounts, parent checking accounts, I can't answer that question because it depends on the parent's income. If you have a family income, adjusted gross income of less than $60,000, if you have less than $80,000 in assets, you can qualify for more grant money. But that's a combination of bank accounts and all of that. If your family income is greater than that, especially when you get up in 75, 100, it doesn't matter what the balance is in your parents' account. It adjusts accordingly at that 2% rate. Why do you need to fill out the FAFSA? Because it's the first step towards any award. So even if you have a student who you don't think is going to get need-based funding, they can't award them merit scholarships for their grades or another school scholarship if they don't have a FAFSA on file, because that's how the colleges are held accountable for how they award funding. No. Okay. When you go to apply for a student loan, they will not check the credit score of the student. But if a parent applies for a Parent Plus loan, they will check their credit score. But because it's a federally backed loan, their credit score can be fairly low and they will still qualify for a Parent Plus loan. If you have more than one student in college, how is their financial aid determined with FAFSA? If you have more than one student in college, each student will have their own expected family contribution. Now, it does lower a little bit because they use this crazy formula. So having more than one student in college, 2 or 3, will decrease your expected family contribution. But all that is dependent upon your family income. So on reporting students' finances, the student had a summer job. If the student filed a tax return, they're going to upload their tax return the same way as the parent did. If the student made less than $1,000 or $1,500, the student doesn't need to report their income on the FAFSA. The student's income would be reported under the student's income. It asks does your student have income? Yes or no? Yes. And then you put in the dollar amount. Very rarely have I seen student income be high enough that it changes the expected contribution. The question is, what do you mean by adjusting the 2% rate on assets checking savings account? So what FAFSA does is they use a formula to determine your family's expected family contribution. Parents' assets, they only consider 2% of a parent's asset. Versus when they look at a student asset, they consider 80% of the student asset to be funds available for college. Yes, if a student has $2,500 in their account, you need to report it. Absolutely. You need to report cash in a student's checking account. And if it's in their own name, I'm telling you to make that balance less than $5,000. For the school list, yes, you include community college, and if you prioritize the schools on the list, that's fine. The only places that it really matters are those in-state schools from earlier. But if it's easier for you as a family to prioritize schools, then I would prioritize them. What else I've got? Okay, so student loans. If your student receives a student loan, you need to complete student loan counseling. There are two types of loans. A subsidized student loan, which are great. These don't have any interest until after the student graduates from college. An unsubsidized loan has interest from the time the student takes it, but they don't have to pay the interest until after they graduate. And then a Parent Plus loan also has interest from the time you take it, and you have to make payments on a Parent Plus loan. And you can turn down any loans you do not need. Grants are awesome because you don't have to pay them back. Grants are usually only for tuition, and they can be renewed. If you're in California, I'm going to go back to here. If you're in California, you can apply for the Cal Grant if your income is less than $150,000 and your assets are less than $80,000. Now that dollar amount adjusts every year, and I haven't seen their adjustment for this year yet. But it's a middle income grant to students in California, but it only applies to schools in California. So if you live in California and your student attends a school in California, you can get a Cal Grant if your family income is less than $150,000. Okay. Then make sure you save all your documents. Students, and this is why, because if you get selected for verification, you need to provide that documentation. Students should check their college financial aid account monthly. Once they've been admitted to a college, they can go in. I've had students receive funding and not know they had it because they didn't go into their student account and check it. So once a student gets accepted to a college, they should go in and check their student account. And I say about every 2 weeks. And then keep all those documents, make sure you have them in one place and put the student's student ID number or the student's social security number on them so that if you turn the documents into the college, they have them. If you need help with your FAFSA, contact your coach. Go to FAFSA.org, call this number or email them. If you mess up your FAFSA ID, if you can't get your FAFSA ID fixed, don't contact your coach. We can't fix your FAFSA ID. Call the 800 number. Okay, I'm going to answer a few more chat line questions. Let's see. A question regarding assets. If parents have 2 separate houses that are considered living homes, 1 tax return, 2 houses are filed as living houses. Yes, You do not have to report either of those two houses on that. Yes, you do you need to file a FAFSA every year? Yes, absolutely. You have to file a FAFSA every year. If the student lives more than 51% with the lower income parent, but the other parent claims the student on their as their dependent on their tax return, can the student file the FAFSA? Yes, the student can still file the FAFSA with the parent that is the lower income parent. It's the parent they live with 51% of the time. Do postgrads complete FAFSAs? Yes, because you can get graduate grants. When's the last day to apply for a FAFSA? Every college is different. What every student should do is look at the priority financial aid deadline for every school that they're applying to and finish their FAFSA before that date. My personal advice is to do it before the Thanksgiving holiday. That will get you in before everybody's priority deadline for filing FAFSA. If you're attending community college, you can file a FAFSA up until the first 2 weeks of school and still apply it to that semester's tuition. So the when to apply for FAFSA is a little bit fuzzy, but really try to get all that information in by the priority deadline. The question is, what's the family income that qualifies for need-based in Michigan? I have no idea. The federal number isn't published yet for this year. It's usually around $60,000, and that's why I put that out there. If you have a high family income, does that mean the student has less of a chance of getting financial aid? Yes, because especially at a state school, the expected family contribution for higher income families is going to be much higher. So the chance of them getting a grant or something like that would be lower. However, schools still offer funding based on grades. So it wouldn't decrease their chances of getting merit-based aid by any means. And a student from a high income family is not going to qualify for any need-based aid at all. Need-based aid is truly for low-income families really making less than $60,000 a year. But private scholarships do not count out family income. I live in Colorado. We have a Better Scholarship. It is based on student achievement, and it's a full ride to any college in the state of Colorado. They don't even ask your family income when you fill out the form. So while yes, some things are lower, it doesn't always that. Some sweet person asked if I could be their coach. I appreciate that. I would love to be your coach. I have to tell you though, the other coaches are awesome and we all work with each other. So trust me, if we have a coach who doesn't know the financial aid question, they ask me. And if I don't know, I call my friends who work in the financial aid office and ask them. Yes, we'll send out tonight's recording. I may re-record it when I have my voice back, so it sounds a little better. So we're on this page that says CSS profile, and somebody asked about that. A CSS profile is used by private colleges to look more closely at your assets. But the CSS profile also looks at debt to income ratio. So if you have a student applying to private colleges, they need to go to that school's financial aid website and find out what they need to do to apply for financial aid. If the school requires a CSS profile, the student needs to fill out the CSS profile. It's much more in depth. It asks a lot more questions, probably 3 times as many as the FAFSA. But like I said, it'll ask you if you have a car, and then if you have a loan on that car, and what's the value of that car. So it looks at all sorts of things when it looks at it. But really, I want the students to hear this, parents to hear this. Your student needs to go out to their colleges they're applying to his website and look at what schools require a CSS profile. My son's applying to several private schools. Half of them require a CSS profile, half of them do not. So I can't blanketly say all private schools require a CSS profile because that isn't true. I can tell you that public schools do not require a CSS profile. That might be wrong. University of North Carolina required one last year. But most public schools do not require a CSS profile. But it's good to check each school's financial aid website because you might find when you go to the website that you can apply for a specific scholarship. Click. So I encourage all the students to go look at the websites. Oh, I said I was going to talk about this. I haven't talked about this yet. And then I'll get back to the chat line. Change in family income. If your family had somebody lose a job, heaven forbid lost a family member, after they filed their 2021 tax return, you are eligible for a financial aid adjustment. So you're going to complete your FAFSA with the information you currently have. Then once you decide on a college, and this cannot be done until you've agreed to attend a college, you're going to contact their financial aid office and talk to them about your current situation. Most of the schools have a form you fill out. What I saw last year was there was a COVID hardship form, and you clicked on that, you filled out the form, you put in unemployment information, loss of business income was on there as well. And I expect that to be on there this coming year as well. Schools are still seeing some residual of that. And then they will adjust your expected family contribution and your need based on that information. Now, this is an independent school decision and all school decisions are final, and it can't be appealed. But I've had lots of students have really good success with this and get their need adjusted because they lost their job or lost income. So we're the Heartland Institute for Financial Education. And our goal is to really help as many students as we can get into college and be successful. Okay, this last page I'm going to put up, there are the websites that you need, and I'm going to just answer questions off the chat line now. Okay. The link will come, it asks if the links will come to the office for consultants or directly to the students from the coaches. I know that as a coach, I will send it directly to my students, but I can request that the office can send it to all the consultants. If you're renewing your FAFSA, the deadline this year is dependent on your school. So you need to look at your school's deadline and find out what that FAFSA deadline is, okay? Every school has an independent deadline. Okay. If the house you're living in has a mortgage, it doesn't matter because you're not reporting the house you're living in. But your rental house is paid off, so you have to report the full taxable value of the rental house. Yeah, do not report the value of the house you are living in. Please, please, please. It really messes up your EFC. The 5K savings limit does not apply to postgrad students. Postgrad students that are already working are almost independent. If they turn 25 during the year of filing, they can switch their status. But that $5,000 limit is for undergrad students. There were some people who couldn't get on because of our limited capacity. Once you get the recording, you are welcome to share it with your friends and family. No problem with that. your student got awarded a grant and the money is in the student account. Does that count towards his assets? No, because it's on the student's account at school, I'm assuming. Grants on the student account at school stay there. In the student reporting section, it asks how much were you awarded in grants. So they can record that there when they file the FAFSA for the next year. But it doesn't get reported under assets. It has its own line. A 16-year-old made $6,000. Should she file her own tax return? Absolutely, because she'll get that money back. She'll get the taxes she paid back on that. So she shouldn't have to pay taxes as a 16-year-old. If a student doesn't have a coach, we actually offer a financial aid package. So you can sign up through the Heartland Foundation for a financial aid package. Odds are pretty good that you'll get me, myself, or one other coach. He and I are the ones who usually do the financial aid packages. And you can get a coach that will help you fill out your FAFSA, talk to you about assets, and adjust things. Does a student have to get a FAFSA ID? Yes, every student needs their own FAFSA ID. The student went to college for a year and then didn't apply for FAFSA second year. Can they apply for third year? Yes. As a student, you may apply for FAFSA any year that you're in school. You could apply now as a second year student and get funding for spring semester even. It would be a late filing, but you could still apply for aid. Can you make changes to the FAFSA once you submit it? Yes, some categories. You can't make mistakes on things like phone numbers and social security numbers, but you can go in and if you move, you can go in and change your address. You can add and subtract schools. You can't change your bank account balance. But there are a handful of things you can change in there. If your student is a junior, no, absolutely do not fill out the FAFSA now. Seniors, students, the FAFSA, the 2022 FAFSA is for students planning to attend college next fall. So if your student is not planning on attending college next fall, do not fill out the FAFSA. There's a question about cryptocurrency. Is it considered an asset or an investment? They changed that for this year. Send that to HIFE and have them get that to me, and I will find the answer to that question, because I know they changed how they're looking at cryptocurrency this year. When will you know how much of a grant your student will receive? Once they've been admitted to a school and their financial aid has been processed, you usually get a statement pretty quickly, depending on the school. Every school is different on that. A Pell Grant this year was $6,756. That dollar amount changes every year. And depending on your expected family contribution, that dollar amount can change. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I apologize for my terrible voice. Really apologize for that. I'll take a couple of questions and then we're about finished. We've got a few more minutes. Can an F1 student apply for FAFSA? Yes, they can apply. They will not get federal need-based aid, but colleges will use that to grant students funding. and they're going to put zeros in their social security number. I hope this was helpful. Please reach out to whoever sent you here if you need extra help. If you're really struggling with FAFSA and really need extra support with financial aid, please sign up with our program. Happy to help you with scholarships, really crazy financial aid stuff. I had a student last year I was on the phone with him and the financial aid office trying to get his aid fixed, and we actually finally got it right. So don't be afraid to, if you need some support, do that. Is FAFSA first come, first serve? Yes and no. Colleges award need-based financial aid on a first come, first serve basis. But generally speaking, if you apply by that priority funding deadline, you're going to be in there to get funding. Also, because of a couple of new bills that happened with COVID, colleges have additional funding for FAFSA right now for need-based financial aid. They actually have an extra pot of money for the student who, say their parent lost their job during COVID and they're not filing that, the school's not finding that out until the student's already been admitted. There's actually a pot of money for that available, so the student could get awarded additionally. Contact info. Trying to find it. I was going to I'll put the contact info in the chat line. Else. You guys are all so sweet. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Coach Amy.